Okay, we are now for almost 5 minutes past the hour. I think that if people join from now on, they're free to do so, but I think we're also free to start the meeting. So hi, Mary. Hi, Umo. Good to have you both on this call. I'm covering today for Chris since he was unavailable and we did not want to keep Shane up unnecessarily long in his evening. I think he has earned his rest by now, so I'm covering and sharing the meeting for him or for Shane and for Chris. So with that said, let's move into the antitrust policy. This is the slide that Shane always runs through, and as he always says, if you have any questions on the antitrust policy, and if you are a Linux Foundation member, you can reach out to Andrew Undergrove, who is the legal counsel to the Linux Foundation. If not, just know that we're working within the confines of US state and federal law and as regards to antitrust, but we are allowed to talk in this group, which is very good, so we can have a good collaboration here. On the agenda, we basically only have the recent news and the outcome of the recent steering committee meeting. We also have any other business if someone wants to raise something. So, in sort of news section, we are now in the public comment period for both ISO, for the proposed draft updates to ISO 5230 and to ISO 18974 or 974, sorry. And we have announced the beginning of the 6-month update period or six-month public comment period for the draft updates that we have done to this. Those are of course all reviewable on the GitHub if you have comments or questions. So far, I don't think we have received any comments, so that's very positive to the ability for us to push our update through. I think especially the ISO 18974 has had very minor updates to it. There are some things updated in ISO 5230, nothing that would sort of break backwards compatibility at this stage, but there are still sort of it's the cycle where it's updating. If we look at other news, Nokia has announced conformance to ISO 5230, the OpenChain specification for license compliance. That's a very good development, and it's very good for sort of the ecosystem to have someone of Nokia's global scale to announce conformance to the specification, and they have done that group wide, so that's very impressive. And in addition to that, that's not part of this news, but I should mention they have also been very active with the telco specification, and that is sort of now maturing and sort of in a stable format. And while that is in a stable format, they have also contributed their telco SBOM validator tool that's available on the GitHub. So if you have an SBOM and if you want to check that the format is conformant and valid to that to the SBOM guide that the telco group has developed, you can download that and run your SBOM through it. In other news, OpenHarmony has also announced 5230 conformance. OpenHarmony is perhaps better known in China, but it's a significant announcement for a project of their scale. So we're super happy to have them on board. In other news, there's been the SBOM study group has had their first meeting. I encourage everyone who could not make it to check out the recording. It was a very good and productive meeting, sort of diving a little bit deeper into the topic of SBOMs than just SPDX versus Cyclone DX or how to manage SBOMs. So I think all in all, that's very positive that we have that study group, and I think it will deliver great things for us on sort of going beyond the mere data format that SPDX versus Cyclone DX or software ID or something else would lead to. So spreading best practices around the use and consumption of SBOMs is very much the mission. And it had presentations of both Kubota-san from Sony and also Mark Etienne from Nokia, talking about the work done in the telco group. There was a recent webinar run by the GTC law firm that was very well attended, and I think they provided some great insight into sort of the current legal landscape around generative AI, the usage in the industry, current legal cases. I also encourage everyone to check this one out because it really was, some of it was really eye-opening, some of it was good reminders of things we probably know, and a lot of it also validated the work that is ongoing in the AI study group with the need for clear specifications around best practices for using Gen AI, both sort of the outcomes of Gen AI, but also incorporating Gen AI into one's products. The automotive work group had a meeting in Stuttgart just before the open source summit in Vienna. I were not able to attend myself, but I understood it was a very good meeting and sort of progressed the topic of compliance and automotive and the use of OpenChain in the automotive ecosystem. So I don't know if recordings of that will be available, but we can get back to that if people would like to see that. And here it is. Another headline for Nokia. I already mentioned this. They have contributed their validator for the telco SBOM guide, which is very useful. On top of that, in coming news, it's actually basically this month. At the end of this month, we will have the Open Compliance Summit, which is the premier event for talking about open source compliance and compliance in an open source setting in Japan, it's the premier event in the world, but this one is held in Japan. I've been there a few times, and I think it's always a privilege coming there. It's probably the best event if you want to get started in open source compliance or compliance in relation to open source in general. But also it's just a super friendly event to go to. It's an excellent opportunity to meet like-minded individuals, discuss both sort of in the official track with what's going on the stage, but also learn and share experiences in the hallway track. So I would highly encourage anyone able to participate to go there. It's also heavily focused on OpenChain. There will be lots of talks around OpenChain, its implementation this year as usual. It should also be mentioned that the days prior to this Open Source Summit Japan is held. So for the price of one trip, you would get 2 events. Work on standards and core material. That we have now covered the news from the project. So we had a steering committee meeting. Shane mentioned in his email to me that this would be the video would be embedded. I'm not sure I can get the embeddedness of this video to work. I couldn't. But if you are interested in the outcome of the steering committee, we will send out the link to this video separately so that you're able to access it, since I don't get the embedded video to work here now for some reason. But essentially, there was no surprises this time around from the steering committee. The steering committee meeting was held just after the board meeting of OpenChain connected to the Open Source Summit Europe in Vienna. And shout out to PwC for lending us their beautiful office to have both our board meeting and the steering committee meeting. As said, there was no real surprises during this meeting. We reiterated and reconfirmed the OpenChain guiding principles. We also reconfirmed the intent to have updates to the specification about every 5 years to align with procurement cycles and to ensure that we have a window that we can be aiming for if updates are needed. But largely things are stable in that ecosystem. So on to the ISO standards, both our security and our license specification. So as mentioned in the beginning of this call, the public comment period for the proposed updates to ISO 5230 and ISO 18974 continues. It's our job, of course, to check out the comments about typos, language clarity, phrasing, and so on. We collect feedback on these and we incorporate them into pull requests, well, by submissions onto GitHub. You can check these out, of course, it's all public. And we aim to close and merge all reject them, where applicable, all open pull requests before the end of the public comment period. As of now, or as of when Chain wrote this, there are no open issues. There may come open issues. We don't necessarily anticipate any. Historically, most comments and requests for changes are made when a specification first comes into ISO, rather than once it's sort of mature and it's only a matter of refinement. So we don't necessarily expect many open issues, but we'll address them as they arise. We don't anticipate or really want to make any major changes based on these public comments. Sometimes they point out typos or other non-material things that we, of course, are happy to address. We're also happy to take the feedback from these public comments, but sort of we believe that the majority of sort of the substantial work should be done in the work group, in the specification work group. And from our last meeting, there are no open items for review. These are sort of what was addressed then. The details of last meeting can be found at this link. There are also no open items for review on the 18974 specification. From the last meeting, we dealt with item 37 and closed that, I believe. And the details can be found at this link. Then it's work on reference and supporting material. And from the education workgroup meeting held, but that will be tomorrow. The report from Andrew, who is chairing that group, is that the wording for the explainer is close to being finalized, and hopefully we can approve these in the meeting that's tomorrow. So if you are interested in that, I encourage you to participate in tomorrow's meeting. They're also reporting that they're close to a release candidate on the capability model, and that's thanks to the fantastic work and feedback from people in our community. So the matrix of this maturity model is now populated, and we're all confident, and they're confident they will be ready to launch in October. Of course, the topic of maturity models is something that's been discussed in the OpenChain community for a long time, and I think we're all happy to see that the education work group is moving forward with the topic to provide more granularity in the OpenChain ecosystem. So that takes us to any other business. Anyone on the call wants to bring something up for discussion or for information or just to generally chit chat?
Very quiet means nothing.
quiet probably means that there's nothing to bring up, and I will again apologize for being a poor substitute for both Shane and Chris, who sadly couldn't make this meeting. But at least we have had the meeting. We allowed people to raise their voices, and for those of you that turned up, despite the lack of our headliner, Chris, I'm very grateful that you did. And if at any other time or after this meeting you figure out I should have raised this, please feel free. The email list has the benefit of always being open. So feel free to raise comments or start conversations there. So with that, I'd like to close the meeting and thank you all for your participation and for listening to me walk through these slides that Shane very helpfully provided to me.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. So I'll open the floor one last time. If there are any question about anything to the project, please feel free to raise it now or at any time on the email list. And still hearing no one, I take it as people are keen to get on with their Tuesday afternoon. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.